A 6-year-old girl waves at the same bus driver every morning. Most kids ignore him, but she smiles, asks about his day, brings him drawings. When her single father loses his job and they face eviction, the quiet bus driver does something that shocks everyone. Because Walter Green isn't just a bus driver, he's a millionaire who's been waiting 30 years to find a family worth his fortune. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The 7:15 a.m. bus was never late. In 3 years of driving Route 42 through the suburbs of Portland, Walter Green had never missed a single day or arrived more than 30 seconds off schedule. Punctuality was one of the few things he could still control in his carefully ordered, quietly lonely life. He pulled up to the Maple Street stop at exactly 7:17 a.m., as he did every weekday morning, and opened the doors. The usual commuters climbed aboard, the businessman who never looked up from his phone, the nurse finishing her night shift who always slept in the back, the college student with headphones perpetually plugged in. And then there was Emma. "Good morning, Mr. Walter." 6-year-old Emma Chen bounced up the bus steps, her pink backpack nearly as big as she was, her smile bright enough to hurt. Her father, David, followed behind, offering Walter an apologetic smile as he swiped their transit cards. "Good morning, Miss Emma," Walter said, his gruff voice softening the way it only did for her. "How are you today?" "I'm good. I lost another tooth." She opened her mouth wide to show him the gap. "The tooth fairy brought me $2, but Daddy says that's because of inflation." "What's inflation?"
"Emma, don't interrogate Mr. Green," David said, gently steering his daughter toward a seat. "I'm sorry," he added to Walter. "She's in a chatty phase." "Don't apologize." Walter actually smiled, a rare occurrence that transformed his weathered face. "She brightens my morning." It was true. In the 3 months since Emma and her father had started taking his bus, the little girl had made it her mission to befriend Walter. She asked him questions about his day, his favorite color, whether he liked dogs or cats better. She brought him drawings she'd made in school, carefully colored pictures of buses and rainbows, and stick figures labeled Mr. Walter. She noticed things, when he looked tired, when he seemed sad, when he wore a different jacket. Most passengers treated Walter like he was invisible, just another piece of the bus's machinery. But Emma saw him, really saw him. David Chen had noticed, of course. How could he not? His daughter had latched onto the elderly bus driver with the kind of innocent affection that only 6-year-olds possessed. Pure, uncomplicated, generous. "You're very patient with her," David said one morning, a few weeks into their routine. "Not everyone is." Walter had looked at him with those sharp gray eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Your daughter is a special child, Mr. Chen. She has a kind heart." "She gets that from her mother." The words slipped out before David could stop them, bringing with them the familiar ache. His wife, Lynn, had died 2 years ago from an aggressive form of leukemia. One day she was there, laughing and alive, and 9 months later she was gone, leaving David alone with a 4-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Walter had simply nodded, understanding in his silence. He didn't offer platitudes or empty condolences. He just drove the bus. And the next morning when Emma climbed aboard, he had a small chocolate for her, the kind wrapped in gold foil. "For being such a good friend," he'd said, gruffly. Emma had beamed and carefully saved the chocolate in her backpack to share with her daddy later. That had been 2 months ago. Now, on this particular October morning, Emma settled into her usual seat, the one directly behind Walter, and proceeded to tell him about her upcoming school project. "We have to make a family tree," she announced, "with pictures and everything. Mrs. Patterson says it's about our heritage." "That sounds like an important project," Walter said, his eyes on the road as he pulled away from the stop. "I'm going to put Mommy on it even though she's in heaven. Daddy says that's okay. Is it okay, Mr. Walter?" Walter's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "It's more than okay, Miss Emma. Your mother will always be part of your family tree. That doesn't change just because she's not here anymore." "That's what Daddy said too. Emma kicked her legs, which didn't quite reach the floor. "Do you have a family tree, Mr. Walter?" David winced. "Emma, that's personal." "It's all right." Walter glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Emma's curious eyes. "I do have a family tree, though it's much smaller than yours will be." "How small?" "Just me now. My wife passed away 30 years ago. We never had children." Emma processed this with the seriousness only a child who'd lost a parent could understand. "Then you're lonely like Daddy was before I started talking to you." "Emma," David started, embarrassed. But Walter was smiling again, that rare, soft smile. "You're right, Miss Emma. I was lonely, but you've helped with that." The bus continued its route, stopping and starting, passengers coming and going, but Emma stayed behind Walter's seat, chattering about her school, her friends, her plans to be a veterinarian when she grew up because she loved animals. Walter listened to every word. What Emma and David didn't know, what no one on Route 42 knew, was that Walter Green was rich. Not comfortable, not well off, rich. 35 years ago, Walter had been a software engineer at a small tech startup in Silicon Valley. He'd been one of the first employees, brought on when the company was just 3 people working out of a garage. He'd believed in the vision, taken stock options instead of a higher salary, worked 18-hour days writing code and debugging systems. When the company went public in 1991, Walter's stock options had been worth $8 million. He'd invested wisely, lived modestly, watched his portfolio grow. By the time he retired at 55, he was worth just over $40 million. And he'd been miserable. His wife, Margaret, had died in a car accident a year before the company went public. They'd planned to travel, to finally enjoy the fruits of his labor, to maybe adopt children since they'd struggled with infertility for years. Instead, Walter had scattered her ashes in the Pacific Ocean and returned to an empty house that suddenly seemed too big, too quiet, too full of ghosts. He tried to fill the void. He donated to charities, millions of dollars to hospitals, schools, homeless shelters. He funded scholarships and research grants. He bought a large house in a nice neighborhood, filled it with expensive furniture he never used, hired a housekeeper who came twice a week to clean rooms he never entered. But money couldn't buy what he really wanted: purpose, family, connection. So 10 years ago, at 63 years old, Walter had done something his financial advisor thought was insane. He'd gotten a commercial driver's license and applied to drive a bus for the Portland Metro Transit Authority.
You want to work for minimum wage when you're worth $40 million? His advisor had sputtered. I want to be useful, Walter had replied. Driving the bus gave him structure, a reason to get up in the morning, people to interact with, even if most of them ignored him. It wasn't much, but it was something. And then, 3 months ago, Emma Chen had bounded onto his bus with her enormous smile and her endless questions, and Walter had felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He'd felt needed. David Shen had been managing. Barely, but managing. His job as a mid-level accountant at a manufacturing firm paid enough to cover rent, food, Emma's school supplies, and the occasional treat: a movie, a trip to the zoo, ice cream on Fridays. It wasn't a luxurious life, but it was stable, predictable, until it wasn't. I'm sorry, David. His manager, Tom, looked genuinely regretful as he slid the termination letter across the desk. The company's downsizing. Your entire department is being eliminated. David stared at the letter, the words blurring together. How long? 2 weeks severance. I fought for 4, but corporate wouldn't budge. Tom's voice dropped. I'll give you a strong reference. You're a good accountant, David. You'll find something else. But finding something else took time, and time was something David's budget didn't account for. The severance lasted exactly 3 weeks. His savings, carefully hoarded for emergencies, lasted another month. He applied for unemployment, but the bureaucracy moved slowly. He sent out resumes, went to interviews, but the job market was tighter than he'd expected.
By December, 2 months after being laid off, David was behind on rent. The landlord, a man who'd been understanding at first, was losing patience. "I've got bills too, David," Mr. Kowalski said, standing in the doorway of their small 2-bedroom apartment. "I've given you extensions, but I need the rent. 2 months' worth, or I'll have to start eviction proceedings. I'm looking for work. I have interviews lined up." "I'm sorry," and Kowalski did look sorry, "but I need the money by the end of December. That's 3 weeks. Figure it out, or you'll have to leave." After Kowalski left, David sat on the couch and put his head in his hands. He'd been so careful. He'd done everything right. Budgeted, saved, planned, and it still wasn't enough. Emma found him there 20 minutes later when he should have been making dinner. "Daddy, why are you sad?" David forced a smile. "I'm not sad, sweetheart, just tired." "You're sad." Emma climbed into his lap, her small hands cupping his face. "It's okay to be sad. That's what you tell me." David's eyes burned. His daughter, his beautiful, perceptive daughter, who'd already lost so much. How was he supposed to tell her they might lose their home too? "We're gonna be okay," he said, and prayed it was true. Emma noticed her father's worry, even though David tried to hide it. She noticed he stopped buying her favorite cereal, that dinner became simpler, that he looked at the mail with the kind of expression he used to get at the hospital when Mommy was sick. She especially noticed that he seemed most stressed in the mornings when they got on Mr. Walter's bus. "Daddy doesn't smile as much anymore," Emma told Walter one morning after David had taken a seat further back to make some phone calls. "I think he's worried." Walter glanced in the rearview mirror at where David sat, hunched over his phone, his expression drawn. "Do you know what he's worried about?" Emma shrugged. "Money, I think. He looks at the bills the same way he looked at Mommy's hospital papers, all stressed and scared." Walter's chest tightened. He'd seen that look before, the expression of someone watching their life fall apart and being powerless to stop it. "I want to help him," Emma continued, her voice small, "but I don't know how. I don't have any money. I only have $3 from the tooth fairy." "The best way to help," Walter said gently, "is to keep being yourself. Keep smiling. Keep telling him about your day. When grown-ups are worried, children's happiness reminds them what they're fighting for." Emma nodded seriously. "I can do that. I'm very good at being happy." "You are indeed, Miss Emma." But as Walter drove the rest of his route that morning, his mind was working. Walter Chen was in trouble, and Emma, sweet, kind Emma, who'd brought light into his gray life, was going to suffer for it. Walter Green had $40 million sitting in investment accounts, earning interest he'd never spend. He had no children, no grandchildren, no family at all. And here was a child who'd given him friendship without expecting anything in return. A father who was clearly good and decent, doing his best in circumstances he couldn't control. For the first time in 30 years, Walter knew exactly what to do with his money. Walter had learned patience from decades of driving a bus. He knew better than to rush in with offers of help. That would embarrass David, maybe even offend him. Pride was a powerful thing, and Walter respected that. So instead, Walter did what any good engineer would do. He gathered information. He started by simply observing. David looked more exhausted each morning. His clothes, while clean, were showing wear. Emma's backpack had a broken zipper that had been mended with duct tape, a temporary fix from a father who couldn't afford to replace it yet. Small things, details most people wouldn't notice, but Walter noticed everything. He also started asking careful questions. "How's the job search going?" he asked David casually one morning after Emma had moved to a seat to work on homework. David looked surprised that Walter had asked, then resigned. "Slower than I'd hoped. The market's tough right now." "What kind of work do you do?" "Accounting. I was with Harrison Manufacturing for 6 years before they downsized. Walter filed this information away. That's a solid company. I'm sorry they let you go. Me too. David managed a weak smile. But I'll find something. I have to. The unspoken words hung between them. I have a daughter depending on me. Walter also paid attention to the stops. He noticed David and Emma now got off 3 blocks further than usual, at a stop near a cheaper grocery store rather than the nicer one closer to home. He noticed they no longer bought coffee from the cafe at their original stop. Every detail painted a picture. A good man, struggling, too proud to ask for help, trying to protect his daughter from worry. Walter understood that kind of pride. He also understood that sometimes pride was a luxury people couldn't afford. On a cold December afternoon, Walter did something he hadn't done in years. He made a personal phone call during work hours. "Jacobson and Associates, how may I help you?"
"I need to speak with Richard Jacobson. Tell him it's Walter Green." There was a pause. "One moment, sir." Richard Jacobson had been Walter's attorney for 25 years, handling his estate planning, his investments, his charitable donations. They'd met perhaps a dozen times in person, conducted most business over the phone, and maintained a relationship built on mutual respect and discretion. "Walter," Richard's voice boomed through the phone, "to what do I owe the pleasure? It's been months." "I need your help with something unusual." "I'm intrigued." Walter explained, carefully and precisely, what he wanted to do. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Walter," Richard said slowly, "are you absolutely certain about this?" "More certain than I've been about anything in 30 years. You understand the legal complexity, the potential complications?" "I do. That's why I'm calling you." Walter's voice was firm. "Can you make it happen?" Another pause. Then, yes, I can make it happen. Give me a week." "Thank you, Richard." "Walter," Richard's voice softened, "I'm glad. I've worried about you, all alone in that big house. This is a good thing you're doing." After hanging up, Walter sat in the break room of the bus depot, his cold coffee forgotten, and allowed himself a small smile. In a week, everything would change, for all of them. December 23rd arrived with freezing rain and the kind of gray sky that made everything feel hopeless. David Chen had exactly 8 days before eviction proceedings would begin. He had $300 in his bank account. His rent was $3,000 behind. The math didn't work. It was never going to work. He'd applied for emergency assistance, but the waiting list was months long. He'd called every contact he had, but no one was hiring before the new year. He'd even swallowed his pride and asked his parents for help, but they were living on fixed retirement income. They'd offered $500, everything they could spare, and David had cried after hanging up the phone. He was going to lose their home, the apartment where Lynn had lived, where her presence still lingered in the way the bathroom door stuck and the loose floorboard in Emma's room that creaked, the only home Emma really remembered. That morning, David could barely look at his daughter as they walked to the bus stop. Emma, oblivious to the depth of their crisis, was chattering excitedly about Christmas, about the modest gifts David had managed to find at thrift stores, about the cookies they were going to bake together. "Maybe Mr. Walter would like some cookies. We should make him some too." "That's a nice idea, sweetheart." The bus arrived precisely on time. Emma bounced up the steps, her smile somehow even brighter than usual. "Mr. Walter, guess what? Only 2 more days until Christmas." "I know, Miss Emma. Are you excited?" "So excited. We're making cookies tonight, and Daddy says we can stay up late on Christmas Eve to watch movies." Walter's eyes met David's over Emma's head. There was something in that look. Understanding, compassion, something deeper that David couldn't quite name. "Mr. Chen," Walter said quietly as Emma moved to her seat, "I need to speak with you. It's important." David's stomach dropped. Had he done something wrong? Was there a problem with their transit cards?
Emma, sit tight for just a minute, okay? Okay, Daddy. David remained standing near the front as other passengers boarded and the bus pulled away from the stop. His heart was pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. When the next stop emptied the front section momentarily, Walter spoke, his eyes still on the road. Mr. Chen, David, I'm going to say something that will sound insane. I need you to hear me out, completely, before you respond. Okay, David said slowly. I'm not just a bus driver. I'm also, for various complicated reasons, a very wealthy man, about $40 million wealthy. David blinked. What? I made money in tech years ago. I drive this bus because I like having purpose, not because I need the income. Walter's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. I've been alone for 30 years. My wife died, we never had children, and I've spent 3 decades trying to figure out what to do with money I'll never spend. Mr. Green, I don't understand. Your daughter befriended me, not because she wanted something, not because she knew about the money. She doesn't, and I'd like to keep it that way for now. She befriended me because she has a kind heart and saw a lonely old man who needed a friend. Walter's voice cracked slightly. She gave me something I couldn't buy. Purpose, joy, a reason to look forward to mornings. David's eyes were burning. She does that for me, too.
I know you're in trouble, David. I've seen the signs. I've been where you are, not financially, but emotionally. Desperate, scared, trying to protect the person you love while everything falls apart. Walter paused as he pulled to another stop, waited for passengers to disembark, then continued. I want to help. I need to help. I can't take your money. I'm not offering to just give you money. Walter's voice was firm but gentle. My attorney has drawn up papers. I want to set up a trust fund for Emma, for her education, her future. I want to pay off your back rent and give you a cushion while you find work. And in exchange, I'd like something from you. David was struggling to breathe. What? I'd like to be part of Emma's life, not replacing anyone. I know she had a mother, and I know Lynn will always be her mother. But I'd like to be a grandfather of sorts, someone who shows up for school plays and birthdays, someone who's there. Walter's hands tightened on the wheel. I'm 73 years old, David. I have no family. I have no one to leave my money to. Your daughter gave me friendship when I needed it most. Let me give you both security. Let me have a family before I die, please. David realized he was crying, full tears streaming down his face in the front of a public bus, while his 6-year-old daughter sat behind him completely unaware that their entire lives were about to change. Why? The question came out choked. Because Emma sees people, really sees them. She saw me when no one else did. That kind of goodness is rare, David, and it's worth everything. Daddy? Emma's voice, concerned. Why are you crying? Is Mr. Walter making you sad? David turned to look at his daughter, this perfect, wonderful child who'd somehow saved them both without even knowing it. No, sweetheart, he's making me very, very happy. Walter's attorney, Richard, met them that afternoon at a cafe. Neutral ground, professional but warm. Emma came too, coloring at a separate table while the adults talked, occasionally bringing Walter pictures she'd drawn. This is you driving the bus, she'd say, and that's me waving, and that's Daddy smiling. Each time, Walter would study the pictures seriously and thank her with genuine gratitude. Richard explained the arrangement clearly, a trust fund for Emma, managed by David, containing $5 million for education and future needs, payment of David's back rent and 3 months advance rent to give him breathing room, a monthly stipend of $5,000 for 2 years to ensure stability while David rebuilt his career,
with the understanding that if David found work earlier, the stipend would stop and the remaining funds would go back to Walter. "This isn't charity," Richard emphasized. "This is Walter investing in a family who's given him something priceless. But David, you need to understand, if you take this, Walter wants to be part of Emma's life. This is a relationship, not a transaction." David looked at Walter, this elderly bus driver who was secretly a millionaire, who'd been so lonely he took a minimum-wage job just to have human connection, who'd seen Emma's kindness and decided to give them everything. "I want you in our lives," David said, "not because of the money, because Emma loves you, because you've been kind to us when you didn't have to be, because you're right, you should have a family." Walter's eyes glistened. "Thank you." Christmas that year was different. Walter joined them for dinner in their small apartment, bringing gifts he'd agonized over, a new backpack for Emma with her favorite character, nothing extravagant but thoughtful, a nice bottle of wine for David, and most importantly, framed photos, pictures Richard had discreetly taken over the past weeks of Emma and Walter on the bus, talking and laughing. "For your family tree project," Walter said gruffly as Emma unwrapped them, "if you want to include me." Emma's face lit up. "You're like my grandpa. Can I call you Grandpa Walter?" Walter's composure cracked. He nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming freely down his weathered face. "Grandpa Walter," Emma repeated, testing it out. She climbed into his lap, something she'd never done before, and hugged him fiercely. "I always wanted a grandpa close by. My other grandparents live far away, but now I have you." David watched this lonely old man hold his daughter, watched decades of grief and isolation melt away in the warmth of a child's unconditional love, and knew with absolute certainty they'd been blessed. The months that followed brought changes, but good ones. David found a new job in February, better than his old one, with more pay and better benefits. He insisted on stopping the stipend immediately, wanting to stand on his own feet again, but he kept the trust fund for Emma. That was for her future, and he wouldn't let pride rob her of that security. Walter officially became Grandpa Walter. He came to Emma's school play, sitting in the front row and clapping louder than anyone. He taught her to play chess, patiently explaining strategies while she chattered about everything except the game. He was there for her 7th birthday party in a room full of her classmates and their parents, no longer the lonely bus driver, but someone's beloved grandfather. He also became David's friend. They had dinner together once a week, talking about work and life and grief. Walter shared stories about Margaret, keeping her memory alive by speaking her name. David shared stories about Lynn, finding comfort in Walter's understanding silence. "I think they'd be happy," David said one evening, after Emma had gone to bed and they sat in David's living room with coffee. "Lynn and Margaret, knowing we found each other." "I think so too," Walter agreed. "Margaret always said I needed to learn to accept help, to let people in. She'd be laughing at the irony, me finally learning her lesson through helping someone else." They sat in comfortable silence, two men who'd both lost their wives, but found family in unexpected places. When Emma finished her family tree project, she insisted on showing Walter before she turned it in. She'd drawn a traditional tree with branches spreading wide. At the top were her grandparents, all 4 of them now, including Grandpa Walter prominently featured. On one branch was her mother, with an angel drawn carefully beside her name. On another branch was her father, and at the bottom, written in careful first-grade handwriting, was Emma herself. "We're all connected," she explained, pointing to the lines she'd drawn between everyone. "Even Mommy, because she's still part of our family, even though she's in heaven. And Grandpa Walter is part of it too, because family isn't just about who you're born to, it's about who loves you." Walter stared at the family tree, at his name written in a child's handwriting, officially claiming him as family, and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for 30 years. He'd spent decades trying to buy purpose, trying to find meaning in charitable donations and investments and empty rooms and an empty house. He'd driven a bus for 10 years, searching for connection, for something real. And he'd found it in the smile of a 6-year-old girl who simply saw a lonely man and decided to be his friend. "Thank you, Emma," his voice rough. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." "It's just a school project, Grandpa Walter." "No," he said firmly. "It's so much more than that." Walter Green retired from bus driving on his 76th birthday. The Portland Metro Transit Authority threw him a party, his route mates gathering to celebrate the man who'd been steadfast and kind for a decade. Emma, now 9 years old, had made a speech. "Grandpa Walter is the best bus driver ever," she'd announced to the room, standing on a chair so everyone could see her. "But he's an even better grandpa. He taught me that the best thing you can do is see people, really see them. Not just look at them, but see who they are inside." He saw me when I was just a kid on a bus, and I saw him when he was lonely, and now we're family. So even though he's retiring from driving, he'll never retire from being my grandpa. The room had erupted in applause, and Walter had cried for probably the 100th time since Emma had come into his life. These days, Walter spent his mornings having breakfast with David and Emma, his afternoons volunteering at the children's hospital reading to kids, and his evenings in the home that no longer felt empty because it was filled with photos and drawings and evidence of life being lived. He'd updated his will, of course. The bulk of his estate would go to Emma's trust to be distributed when she turned 25. A generous amount went to David. The rest was divided among charities, with one notable exception, a scholarship fund for children who'd lost parents, named in honor of Lynn Chen and Margaret Green. "Are you happy, Grandpa Walter?" Emma asked him one Saturday morning as they sat in his garden, her working on homework while he read the newspaper. Walter looked at this child who'd saved him, at David inside making lunch and humming along to the radio, at the life that had grown around him like flowers after a long winter. "Happier than I ever thought possible, sweetheart." "Good." Emma returned to her math homework, then paused. "Grandpa Walter, when I grow up, I want to be like you." "A bus driver?" "No." She looked at him with those wise eyes that had seen through his loneliness to the man underneath. "Someone who sees people, someone who helps when they can, someone who makes family out of friends." Walter reached over and squeezed her hand. "You already are that person, Emma. You already are." And it was true. This little girl with her enormous heart had looked at a lonely old man on a bus and decided he deserved friendship. That simple act of kindness had created a family where none existed, had given purpose to wealth that had been purposeless, had reminded two people broken by grief that healing was possible. Sometimes the richest people are the loneliest, and sometimes a child's smile is worth more than $40 million. Walter Green had learned both lessons, and in learning them, he'd found what he'd been searching for his entire life. He'd found home. If this story reminded you that kindness costs nothing but means everything, that family is built on love rather than blood, and that seeing people, really seeing them, can change lives, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected families, second chances, and the beautiful ways people save each other.